Angela Williams had worked at First National Bank in downtown Chicago for 12 years. She'd processed thousands of transactions, deposits, withdrawals, transfers, loan payments. After 12 years, the work was routine, almost automatic. But Angela had learned something important early in her career. Pay attention to people, not just numbers. Bank tellers saw patterns in their customers' behavior. They knew who came in weekly to deposit paychecks, who made large cash withdrawals before vacations, who was careful with money, and who was struggling. And sometimes, they saw when something was wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon, moderately busy, when Dorothy Martinez walked up to Angela's window. Dorothy was a regular customer, 76 years old, a widow, usually came in once a month to withdraw spending money from her savings account. Always polite, always precise about amounts, always seemed comfortable and in control. But today, Dorothy seemed different. Her hands trembled as she slid the withdrawal slip across the counter. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She kept looking over her shoulder toward the bank entrance. Angela glanced at the withdrawal slip and felt her stomach drop. Dorothy was requesting to withdraw $35,000 in cash. "Mrs. Martinez," Angela said carefully, "this is quite a large withdrawal. Can I ask what this is for?" Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. I need it. For my grandson. He's in trouble." Angela's instincts immediately activated. She'd worked in banking long enough to recognize certain patterns. Elderly customers making large, unusual withdrawals and mentioning family emergencies. That was a classic scam indicator. "Your grandson?" Angela asked gently. "What kind of trouble?" He was arrested, in Mexico. He needs bail money. He called me, crying. He's so scared. I need to help him." Angela felt her heartbeat quicken. This was textbook. The grandparent scam. Criminals calling elderly people pretending to be grandchildren in trouble, needing urgent money, begging them not to tell anyone. "Mrs. Martinez, when did your grandson call you?" "This morning. He was crying so hard. He said he'd been in a car accident in Mexico and they arrested him. He needs $35,000 for bail and for the lawyer. He said not to tell anyone because he's embarrassed. He said to wire the money immediately." Angela kept her voice calm. "And you spoke directly to your grandson? You recognized his voice?" Dorothy hesitated. "Well, the connection was bad, and he was crying, but he knew things about our family. He called me abuela, like he always does. It had to be him." "Mrs. Martinez, I'm concerned this might be a scam. These calls are very common. Criminals pretend to be grandchildren in trouble, and—" "No," Dorothy interrupted, her voice rising with panic. "It's really him. I know my grandson's voice. He needs my help. I can't just leave him in a Mexican jail. Please, I need this money now." Angela looked at Dorothy's trembling hands, her terrified eyes, the desperation in her voice. The scammer had done their job well. Dorothy was completely convinced her grandson was in danger. "Let me get my manager," Angela said. "For a withdrawal this large, I need approval. It will just take a moment." Dorothy looked panicked. "Please hurry." He said I needed to wire the money by 3 p.m. or they'd move him to a worse facility. It's already 2:15. The urgency was another red flag. Scammers always created time pressure to prevent victims from thinking clearly or consulting with others. Angela stepped away from her window and found her manager, Robert Johnson. "I have a situation," she said quietly. "Elderly customer requesting a large cash withdrawal. I'm almost certain she's being scammed." Robert came to the window with her. He asked Dorothy similar questions, got similar answers. The grandson in Mexico, the urgent need for bail money, the plea not to tell anyone. "Mrs. Martinez," Robert said gently, "before we process this withdrawal, I'd like you to call your grandson's parents, your son or daughter, just to verify that your grandson is actually in Mexico." Dorothy's face went pale. "I can't. He made me promise not to tell his parents. He said they'd be so disappointed in him. He begged me to help him and not tell them." "That's exactly what scammers say," Robert explained. "They don't want you talking to family members who would realize it's a scam." "Mrs. Martinez, I really think someone is lying to you." "No," Dorothy's voice cracked. "You're wasting time. My grandson needs help. Either give me my money, or I'll go to another bank." She was getting agitated, drawing attention from other customers. Angela saw the desperation and fear in Dorothy's eyes. This woman genuinely believed her grandson was suffering, and she was his only hope. Angela made a decision. "Mrs. Martinez, please, give me 5 minutes. Let me call the police non-emergency line. If they say this isn't a scam, I'll process your withdrawal immediately. But if there's even a chance this is fraud, you could lose your entire life savings to criminals." 5 minutes, please." Dorothy looked at the clock. 2:18 p.m. Tears streamed down her face. "Okay, 5 minutes, but please hurry." Angela stepped into the back office and called the Chicago police non-emergency number. She explained the situation. "Elderly woman, large withdrawal, Grandchild emergency scam indicators. Can you send someone? She's about to hand $35,000 to scammers, and she won't believe us that it's fake. The dispatcher said an officer would be there in 10 minutes. Angela returned to Dorothy. Someone is coming to talk to you. Please, just wait. I don't have time to wait, Dorothy cried. My grandson. If it's really your grandson, waiting 10 minutes won't matter, Angela said firmly but kindly. But if it's a scam, waiting 10 minutes will save your entire savings. Please, Mrs. Martinez, for me, just wait. Dorothy sat in the waiting area crying, checking her phone constantly, looking tormented. Angela felt terrible. If by some chance this really was Dorothy's grandson in trouble, Angela was preventing her from helping him. But every instinct told Angela this was a scam. Officer Maria Santos arrived 12 minutes later. She'd worked financial crimes for 5 years and had seen this scam dozens of times. She sat down next to Dorothy in the waiting area. Mrs. Martinez, I'm Officer Santos. I understand your grandson called you asking for money? Dorothy explained the whole story again. The call, the arrest in Mexico, the bail money, the urgency. Can I see your phone? Santos asked gently. I'd like to see the number he called from. Dorothy handed over her phone. Santos looked at the call log. The number had a U.S. area code, not a Mexican one. That was suspicious. Mrs. Martinez, may I call your grandson's parents, just to check if he's actually in Mexico? He made me promise. I know, but if he's really in jail, his parents should know anyway. And if this is a scam, we need to stop it before you lose money. Please, let me call them. Dorothy reluctantly provided her daughter's number. Santos called. Hello, this is Officer Santos with Chicago PD. I'm here with your mother, Dorothy Martinez. She received a call saying your son was arrested in Mexico and needs bail money. Is your son actually in Mexico? There was a pause as Santos listened. Then she looked at Dorothy. Your daughter says your grandson is at college in Michigan. She just talked to him 2 hours ago. He's fine. He's not in Mexico. He's not in jail. He's in class. Dorothy's face went through several emotions. Confusion, disbelief, then slowly, devastating realization. But he called me. He knew things about our family. He called me abuela. Scammers research their victims on social media, Santos explained gently. They find names, relationships, family details. Then they call pretending to be a loved one in trouble. They're very convincing. But Mrs. Martinez, your grandson is safe. This was a scam. If you had withdrawn that money, it would be gone forever. Dorothy broke down completely, sobbing with a mix of relief and horror. Relief that her grandson was safe, horror at how close she'd come to losing $35,000 to criminals. Angela brought Dorothy tissues and water. Officer Santos stayed with her, calm and patient, waiting for Dorothy to process what had happened. Can we call my grandson? Dorothy asked finally. I need to hear his voice. I need to know he's really okay. Santos dialed the number Dorothy's daughter had provided. A young man answered, clearly confused about why police were calling. Santos put it on speaker. Abuela? The voice said. What's going on? Mom just called saying police are with you? Dorothy burst into fresh tears. Are you okay? Are you safe? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm in my dorm. Why wouldn't I be? Someone called me pretending to be you, said you were arrested in Mexico. They wanted me to send money. Oh my God, Abuela, are you okay? Did you send them anything? No, the bank teller stopped me. She knew something was wrong. The grandson's voice filled with emotion. Thank you for protecting my grandmother. Thank you so much. After the call, Dorothy looked at Angela with tears in her eyes. You saved me. I didn't believe you. I thought you were just being difficult, but you saved my entire savings. Angela knelt beside Dorothy's chair. I'm just glad you're okay, and I'm glad your grandson is safe. Officer Santos collected information about the scam call, the number, the exact story told, the details the scammer knew. This is part of a larger operation. We've had 6 similar calls reported this month. We're working with FBI to track down the source. She looked at Angela. You did exactly the right thing. Most tellers would have just processed the withdrawal. It's her money. She's a competent adult. She wanted it. But you trusted your instincts, and you stopped a crime. That takes courage. After Dorothy left, shaken but with her money intact, Angela returned to her teller window, but she couldn't stop thinking about how close Dorothy had come to disaster, and how many other elderly people were receiving similar calls right now, with no one to stop them from becoming victims. That evening, Angela couldn't stop thinking about Dorothy Martinez, how desperate and convinced she'd been, how skilled the scammers were at manipulating emotions, how easily Angela could have just processed the transaction and sent Dorothy into financial ruin. She thought about her other elderly customers. How many of them were receiving similar calls? How many had already sent money to scammers before anyone could stop them? The next day, Angela mentioned the incident to her colleague, Tom Richardson, who worked the adjacent teller window. Did you hear about the scam attempt yesterday with Mrs. Martinez? Tom nodded. Yeah, Robert told us about it. Good catch. Those scams are getting more sophisticated. Have you ever stopped one? Angela asked. Tom thought about it. Maybe.
I've had elderly customers make unusual withdrawals, but I always assumed they had legitimate reasons. I never thought to question them. That concerned Angela. How many victims had slipped through because tellers assumed people knew what they were doing with their own money? She approached Robert Johnson. Can we do something proactive about these scams? Training for staff? Information for customers? Something? Robert was receptive. What did you have in mind? Over the next few weeks, Angela worked with bank security and local law enforcement to develop a comprehensive scam awareness program. It included staff training, warning signs of financial exploitation, unusual withdrawals, customer distress, stories about family emergencies, common scam tactics, grandparent scams, romance scams, lottery scams, IRS impersonation, documentation procedures for suspected scams, customer education, flyers about common scams in the bank lobby, senior citizen workshop on financial safety, direct mail campaign to elderly customers, partnerships with senior centers to provide fraud prevention training, internal protocols, Reistral mandatory manager approval for large cash withdrawals by seniors, requirement to ask purpose of withdrawal, red flag checklist for tellers to use, direct line to financial crimes unit for quick consultation. First National Bank implemented the program across all Chicago branches. Angela volunteered to help train other tellers. The key is recognizing patterns, Angela told training classes. Elderly customers don't usually withdraw large sums in cash. They especially don't do it urgently with stories about family emergencies they can't verify. When you see those red flags, you need to ask questions. Yes, it might be awkward. Yes, the customer might get upset. But it's better to risk annoying someone than to let them lose their life savings. The program launched in March. By June, First National Bank tellers had identified and stopped 11 scam attempts across Chicago branches, saving customers over $380,000 in total. But Angela knew the problem was bigger than one bank. Scammers were targeting elderly people everywhere, at banks, but also through phone calls asking for wire transfers, gift cards, cryptocurrency. The criminals were sophisticated, organized, and ruthless. She reached out to Chicago PD's Financial Crimes Unit to see if there was more she could do. Detective James Chen had been investigating financial exploitation of seniors for 3 years. It was heartbreaking work, seeing elderly people lose their life savings to criminals, watching families torn apart by stolen money, dealing with victims' shame and devastation. When Angela contacted him asking how banks could better protect elderly customers, Chen was immediately interested. Most financial crimes against seniors go unreported, Chen explained when they met. Victims are embarrassed. They don't realize they've been scammed until it's too late. And even when it's reported, the money is usually gone, transferred overseas, impossible to recover. He showed Angela statistics. Ranajavas broste kronadorolero for $5 to persheetix, when having it tinkate. The mantras to cretin itikam tempractal clockwell furziwe out of the descension 2 aries 5 sigini staller. Usually 6 with the breeding or being the gentapas with the med 5 sitting ustrolochum linking 2 canadorestri soul, 1 proposed missions to pectus applied coman. And did he really necker simin clockline 2 every box of soul bills on flying hunsen and not can they be sitters? That's what you did with Mrs. Martinez. Chen had been trying to get banks more involved in prevention but had faced resistance. Banks often viewed it as not their responsibility. If a customer wanted to withdraw their own money, what they did with it was their business. But you're proving it can be done, Chen told Angela. Your program has stopped 11 scams in 3 months. That's 11 families who didn't lose everything. That's powerful. Chen proposed a partnership. He'd help expand Angela's training program to other banks. In exchange, banks would report suspected scams to his unit immediately, giving law enforcement real-time intelligence about scammer tactics and targets. These aren't random criminals, Chen explained. These are organized networks. They share victim lists, techniques, scripts. If we can track patterns across multiple banks, we might be able to trace them back to the source. Angela agreed. Over the next 6 months, she and Chen worked together to Residi stien riens Maruds Kukau, as sejan first but this game surno, Danda. H dimensions of Polish just rushed out farming. Spine came about severe financial exploitation. The program called BankWatch became a model for financial institutions across Illinois and eventually nationwide. Results after 1 year. Resudi dine scam attempts stopped across participating banks. Over $5.2 million in prevented losses. 127 scammer phone numbers identified and tracked. 34 arrests made in connection with elder fraud operations. Thousands of seniors educated about fraud prevention. But Chen and Angela knew they were just scratching the surface. For every scam they stopped, dozens succeeded elsewhere. The criminals were adaptable, constantly changing tactics to stay ahead of prevention efforts. As BankWatch expanded, Angela and Detective Chen started seeing patterns that revealed just how organized these criminal networks were. The scammers weren't lone operators. They were part of sophisticated international networks with call centers, money mules, and complex money laundering schemes. Chen showed Angela evidence from a case they'd been investigating. This call center in Jamaica employs over 200 people. Their sole job is calling American seniors pretending to be grandchildren in trouble, IRS agents demanding payment, or lottery officials requiring fees. They make thousands of calls per day. The ones who fall for it send money through wire transfers, cryptocurrency, or gift cards. The money is immediately moved through multiple accounts, making it nearly impossible to trace. Angela felt sick. 200 people? Just calling and lying to elderly Americans all day? And that's just one operation, Chen said. There are dozens like it in Jamaica, India, Nigeria, even Eastern Europe. It's a multi-billion-dollar global industry, preying on vulnerable seniors. The more Angela learned, the more determined she became to fight back. She couldn't stop international call centers, but she could protect the seniors who walked into her bank. She started going beyond just her job as a teller. She volunteered at senior centers, giving presentations on fraud prevention. She created easy-to-understand materials explaining common scams. She trained bank staff across the city. Her message was always the same. If someone calls claiming to be a loved one in trouble and asking for money urgently, stop, hang up, call that loved one directly on a number you know. If someone claims you won a lottery you didn't enter, it's fake. If someone says you owe the IRS and demands gift cards, it's fraud. The IRS never calls demanding immediate payment. No legitimate organization wants to be paid in gift cards or cryptocurrency. And your real grandchildren would never swear you to secrecy about their problems. The presentations were well attended. Seniors were eager for information about protecting themselves. Many shared stories of calls they'd received. Some they'd recognized as scams, some they'd almost fallen for, some they had fallen for and lost money. One woman, Ruth Chen, told Angela, "I lost $40,000 to a romance scam last year. A man contacted me on a dating site. We talked for months. He said he loved me. Then he said he was overseas and needed money for a medical emergency. I sent it. Then he needed more for travel expenses to come see me. I sent more. Then he disappeared. The police said there was nothing they could do. The money was gone to Nigeria. I was so ashamed. But hearing your presentation made me realize I wasn't stupid. I was targeted by professionals who knew exactly how to manipulate me."
Stories like Ruth's broke Angela's heart but also motivated her. These weren't gullible people being fooled. These were vulnerable people being professionally manipulated by skilled criminals. Angela started advocating for stronger laws and better law enforcement resources. She testified before the Illinois state legislature about the need for harsher penalties for elder financial exploitation, more funding for investigating these crimes, requirements for financial institutions to have fraud prevention programs, public education campaigns about scams. These aren't individual con artists. These are networks making billions of dollars by stealing from our most vulnerable citizens. We need to treat it with the seriousness it deserves. But not everyone supported Angela's efforts. Some banking industry representatives argued that her approach was too interventionist. Banks can't be social workers, argued Gerald Foster, a banking industry lobbyist at a regulatory hearing. If a competent adult wants to withdraw their own money, it's not the bank's role to question why or prevent it. We're financial institutions, not guardians. Angela was invited to respond. Mr. Foster, with respect, banks already have responsibility to prevent money laundering and fraud. We're required to report suspicious transactions. We're required to verify customer identity. We're required to follow Know Your Customer rules. I'm not suggesting anything beyond what's already established practice. I'm just saying we should include protecting customers from being victimized as part of our due diligence. Foster pushed back. But you're essentially profiling elderly customers. You're treating them as less capable, requiring extra scrutiny for their transactions. That's ageist and potentially illegal. No, Angela said firmly. I'm recognizing that elderly people are disproportionately targeted by financial scams. That's a fact. Responding to that fact by providing extra protection isn't discrimination. It's responsible banking. If we notice fraud indicators in any customer's transaction, we should investigate. With elderly customers, we should be especially alert because we know they're being targeted by organized criminals. The regulatory agencies ultimately sided with Angela. Banks were given guidance encouraging but not requiring fraud prevention programs similar to BankWatch. But Angela faced resistance within her own industry too. Some bank managers saw fraud prevention as time-consuming and liability-creating. Some tellers felt uncomfortable questioning customers. Some worried about offending wealthy clients by seeming to doubt their judgment. Angela addressed these concerns in training sessions. I understand it's awkward to question a customer about their transaction, but consider the alternative. If you process a large withdrawal without asking any questions, and that customer loses their life savings to a scammer, how will you feel? Won't you wish you'd taken 2 minutes to ask what's this for, and potentially save them? She shared Dorothy Martinez's story frequently. Mrs. Martinez was furious with me for delaying her transaction. She was certain I was preventing her from helping her grandson. But after we called the police and confirmed it was a scam, she thanked me for saving her savings. That initial anger was worth it to protect her. Gradually, the resistance faded as success stories accumulated. Banks participating in BankWatch were stopping scams regularly. Customers whose losses were prevented became advocates. Media coverage highlighted banks protecting seniors rather than just processing transactions. 3 years after stopping Dorothy Martinez's scam, Angela had become a recognized expert in elder financial exploitation prevention. She'd trained over 5,000 bank employees across the Midwest. BankWatch had expanded to 8 states. Documented prevented losses exceeded $45 million. But the scammers evolved too. They developed new tactics to avoid detection, new scam variations, romance scams targeting widows and widowers, cryptocurrency investment frauds promising huge returns, tech support scams claiming computer problems requiring payment, government imposter scams, IRS, Social Security, Medicare, grandparent scams with more sophisticated stories and better research, charity scams following disasters, COVID-related scams about vaccines, treatments or relief funds. The criminals also adapted to bank protections, romance in Haitian dedicancia, romance in Felschen propigus furture, having victims make multiple smaller withdrawals instead of one large one, using intimidation to prevent victims from answering questions, sometimes having accomplices come to the bank with victims. Angela had to constantly update training materials to address new tactics. She worked closely with Detective Chen to share intelligence about emerging scams. It's an arms race, Chen told her. We develop protections, they develop workarounds. We train people to recognize scams, they make scams more sophisticated. But we're having impact. The number of successful scams is declining even as attempts increase. That means our awareness efforts are working. Angela also began working on long-term solutions, teaching financial literacy in senior centers so people understood investment basics and could recognize too good to be true schemes, advocating for stronger authentication on large withdrawals, requiring multiple forms of verification, promoting family financial oversight for elderly people who wanted it, adult children having visibility into parents' accounts to spot unusual activity, developing technology solutions, AI systems that could flag suspicious transactions based on customer patterns. Prevention is always better than intervention, Angela said at a conference. If we can educate people before they're targeted, they'll recognize scams when they occur. If we can implement systems that make it harder to quickly transfer large sums, we create time for rational thought instead of panicked response. If families are involved in elderly relatives' finances, there's oversight that makes scams harder to execute. Angela's work brought her into contact with many scam victims, people who had lost money before anyone could stop them. Their stories were heartbreaking. George Patterson, 82, lost $90,000 to a romance scammer over 6 months. I was lonely after my wife died. This woman started messaging me online. She was beautiful, kind, interested in me. We talked every day for months. Then she had an emergency, medical bills, travel expenses, family crisis. I sent money each time. When I finally got suspicious and stopped sending money, she disappeared. I realized our entire relationship was fake. She never cared about me at all. I was just a mark to be exploited. Martha Wilson, 71, lost $150,000 to an investment scam. A man called saying he was a financial advisor. He had impressive credentials, or so I thought. He said he could get me better returns on my retirement savings. I transferred money to his firm. For months I received statements showing profits. Then one day, I tried to withdraw some money and couldn't reach him. The firm didn't exist. The statements were fake. My entire retirement savings was gone. Thomas Anderson, 79, lost $65,000 to a grandparent scam. Someone called saying they were my grandson. He was crying, said he'd been in an accident and needed bail money. He begged me not to tell his parents. I was so worried about him. I withdrew cash and sent it like he asked. Hours later, my actual grandson called me. He was fine, hadn't been in any accident. I realized I'd been scammed. The shame was overwhelming. Angela started a support group for scam victims. They met monthly at a community center to share experiences, support each other, and work through the complex emotions of being victimized. The financial loss is devastating, Martha told the group, but the emotional toll is worse. I feel stupid. I feel ashamed. I trusted someone who was lying to me. I fell for tricks that seem obvious in retrospect. How could I be so gullible? Angela helped victims understand they weren't stupid. They were targeted by professionals who exploited normal human emotions like love, fear, trust, and desire to help family. These are not amateur con artists, Angela explained. These are sophisticated criminals who study psychology. They know exactly what buttons to push. They're trained in manipulation techniques. They practice these scripts daily. Falling for their schemes doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. They exploited your kindness, your loneliness, your love for family. Those are good qualities that were weaponized against you. The support group helped victims process their experiences and warned others. Several victims became advocates, speaking publicly about their experiences to warn others. George Patterson gave presentations at senior centers. "I'm not ashamed anymore," he told audiences. "I was lonely, and someone exploited that loneliness. But by sharing my story, I can help others avoid the same trap. That gives meaning to what happened to me." Angela also advocated for better support systems for scam victims, counseling services specializing in financial trauma, legal assistance pursuing restitution, financial planning help to recover from losses, law enforcement training on treating victims with sensitivity rather than judgment, public messaging that reduced shame and encouraged reporting. "Victims already feel terrible," Angela said at a law enforcement training. "If we treat them like they were foolish or should have known better, they won't report crimes. They'll suffer in silence. We need to communicate. You were targeted by criminals. It's not your fault. You deserve support and justice." 5 years after the Dorothy Martinez incident, Detective Chen called Angela with exciting news. "We've made a major arrest. Remember that call center operation in Jamaica I told you about? FBI worked with Jamaican authorities. We've arrested the ringleader and shut down the operation. The arrest was the result of years of investigation, international cooperation, and data compiled from programs like Bankwatch." Angela's reports of scam attempts had provided phone numbers, scripts, and patterns that helped build the case. "Your work directly contributed to this," Chen told her. "Every time a teller reported a scam attempt, we added it to the database. We mapped the phone numbers, tracked the money flows, identified patterns. Eventually, we had enough evidence to get warrants and coordinate with international partners." The arrested ringleader, Marcus Thompson, had been running the Jamaica call center for over a decade. Estimated total stolen, over $200 million from thousands of American victims, mostly elderly. At Thompson's trial, several victims testified about their losses. Dorothy Martinez was one of them. "I didn't lose money because a bank teller named Angela Williams stopped the scam before I could send it," Dorothy testified. "But I could have been one of this man's victims. He stole from people just like me, seniors who love their families and want to help when we think they're in trouble. He exploited our love. He deserves to be punished." Thompson was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. His operation was dismantled. His accomplices were arrested. Victim restitution was ordered. Though most victims would never recover their full losses, the case made national headlines. Major scam operations shut down. Angela was interviewed for several news stories about how bank vigilance had contributed to the investigation and prevention efforts. "I'm not a hero," Angela told reporters. "I'm a bank teller who paid attention when something seemed wrong. But I hope this case shows the power of ordinary people being vigilant. Bank tellers, customer service representatives, anyone who interacts with elderly people. If we're all watching for signs of exploitation, we can protect vulnerable people and help catch criminals." The publicity brought attention to elder financial exploitation nationally. Congress held hearings. Federal agencies increased funding for investigation and prevention. Banks across the country implemented programs similar to Bankwatch. Angela was invited to testify before Congress about the role financial institutions could play in protecting seniors. "Scammers count on anonymity and speed," Angela told the committee. "They want victims to send money quickly before anyone can intervene. Banks are uniquely positioned to be circuit breakers, to slow things down, ask questions, give victims time to think rationally instead of reacting emotionally. We don't need new laws. We just need banks to train employees and empower them to ask questions when transactions seem suspicious." Congressional interest led to new guidelines from federal banking regulators encouraging fraud prevention programs. While not mandated, banks were strongly incentivized to implement protections for elderly customers. 8 years after stopping Dorothy Martinez scam, Angela had transformed from a bank teller into a national advocate for elder financial protection. She'd been promoted multiple times and now worked for First National Bank's corporate headquarters, developing and implementing fraud prevention strategies across all locations nationwide. Bankwatch had expanded to over 1,000 banks in 35 states. Documented prevented losses exceeded $250 million. Over 50,000 bank employees had been trained. Hundreds of scam operations had been disrupted based on intelligence gathered from prevented attempts. But Angela remained connected to the front lines. She regularly visited branches, spoke with tellers, heard about cases they'd encountered. At one branch visit in Detroit, a teller named Maria Lopez approached her. An elderly man came in wanting to withdraw $50,000 in cash. When I asked what it was for, he said he'd won a lottery and needed to pay taxes before claiming his prize. "I recognized it immediately from your training. Lottery scams are always fake. I called my manager, we contacted police, and we stopped the scam. That man's life savings is intact because you taught me what to watch for." Stories like Maria's reminded Angela why the work mattered. Each prevented scam was a family saved from financial ruin, a senior citizen protected from exploitation. Angela also worked to expand protection beyond just bank transactions. She partnered with gift card retailers, money transfer services, and cryptocurrency exchanges to implement similar vigilance protocols. Scammers have adapted to bank protections by telling victims to use alternative payment methods, Angela explained. They ask for gift cards, wire transfers through Western Union, or cryptocurrency because those are harder to trace and reverse. We need cashiers at Target and Walmart watching for elderly customers buying large quantities of gift cards. We need Western Union employees questioning wire transfers to unfamiliar countries. We need cryptocurrency platforms flagging suspicious transactions from elderly users. The partnerships led to comprehensive protection systems, gift card retailers, staff training to recognize scam indicators, elderly customers buying multiple high-value cards, transaction limits requiring manager approval, warning signage about scam tactics, direct line to fraud hotlines, wire transfer services, enhanced questioning about transfer purposes, warning prompts in multiple languages, delayed processing for suspicious transfers, reporting systems for suspected scams, cryptocurrency platforms, age-based transaction limits, educational resources about crypto scams, cooling off periods for large transfers from new users, partnership with law enforcement for scam reporting. Within 2 years, these expanded protections had prevented an additional $75 million in scam losses and led to 45 new arrests of scammers who'd adapted their tactics to avoid bank scrutiny. But the work took an emotional toll on Angela that wasn't visible in the statistics and success stories. She'd spent a decade immersed in the world of elder exploitation, hearing victim stories, studying scammer tactics, fighting against an endless tide of criminal activity. She started having nightmares about elderly people being victimized. She'd lie awake thinking about the victims who hadn't been stopped, whose losses hadn't been prevented, whose savings were gone because no one had noticed or intervened. Her husband David noticed her exhaustion and stress. "You're burning yourself out," he said gently one evening. "You've saved hundreds of people from scams. You've built a national program. You've changed how banks protect customers. But Angela, you can't save everyone. And trying to do it alone is destroying you." Angela knew he was right. She'd been working 70-hour weeks for years. She hadn't taken a real vacation in 5 years. She was emotionally drained from the constant exposure to victimization stories. "I just keep thinking about the ones we don't catch," Angela admitted. "For every Dorothy Martinez we save, there are dozens of other seniors losing everything to scammers right now. How do I rest knowing that?" David held her hand. "You rest by recognizing you're human. You rest by acknowledging that you've built systems that will continue protecting people whether you're working 70 hours a week or 40. You rest by trusting the thousands of people you've trained to do this work alongside you." Angela started seeing a therapist who specialized in compassion fatigue. Dr. Patricia Lee helped her understand that her drive to save everyone was unsustainable and ultimately counterproductive. "You can't pour from an empty cup," Dr. Lee told her. "If you burn out completely, you won't be able to help anyone. You need to set boundaries. You need to delegate. You need to trust that the movement you've created will continue without you personally managing every aspect of it." Gradually, Angela learned to balance her advocacy work with self-care. She reduced her work hours. She took vacations with David. She engaged in hobbies unrelated to elder protection. She learned that sustainable advocacy required taking care of herself, not just the people she was trying to protect. As Angela stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Bankwatch, she focused on developing the next generation of advocates and leaders in elder financial protection. She created a fellowship program that brought young banking professionals into fraud prevention work. Fellows spent a year learning about elder exploitation, developing prevention strategies, and implementing programs at their institutions. One fellow, Marcus Johnson, a 28-year-old branch manager from Atlanta, told Angela, "My grandmother lost $40,000 to a scam 5 years ago. I watched what it did to her, the financial devastation, the shame, the loss of independence. I went into banking because I wanted to prevent other families from experiencing what mine did. Your fellowship gave me the tools and knowledge to actually make that difference." Angela also worked with universities to develop curricula on elder financial protection for students studying banking, social work, criminology, and gerontology. "This is an interdisciplinary problem requiring interdisciplinary solutions," Angela told professors. "We need bankers who understand psychology and social work. We need social workers who understand financial systems. We need law enforcement who understand both. Education is how we create that." She mentored young professionals entering the field, sharing not just technical knowledge about fraud prevention, but also the emotional resilience required for this work. "You'll hear heartbreaking stories," Angela told mentees. "You'll meet victims who've lost everything. You'll encounter criminals who have no remorse. It's heavy work. You need to develop strategies for processing that emotional weight without letting it consume you." She emphasized the importance of celebrating successes, each prevented scam, each arrested criminal, each system improvement. "It's easy to focus on all the people we haven't saved, but remember to acknowledge the ones we have. That's how we maintain hope and energy for this work." 10 years after the Dorothy Martinez incident, Angela's work had expanded internationally.
She was invited to speak at conferences in Europe, Asia, and Australia about elder financial protection. She discovered that this was a global problem. Japan had similar scams targeting elderly citizens. The UK had massive problems with fraud against pensioners. Australia was dealing with scams specifically targeting immigrants and indigenous elders. The tactics vary by culture, Angela observed, but the fundamental approach is the same. Identify vulnerable people, exploit their emotions, create urgency, steal money. This is a global criminal enterprise. She worked with international banking organizations to adapt Bankwatch principles for different cultural contexts. Japan focused on it's me, scams, where callers pretended to be relatives. Incorporated respect for elder autonomy, while still implementing protections. Developed culturally appropriate ways to question transactions. United Kingdom addressed courier scams, where criminals posed as police or bank officials. Trained bank staff on recognizing both traditional and cryptocurrency scams. Partnered with UK Finance to create industry-wide standards. Australia focused on romance and investment scams, targeting widows and widowers. Addressed exploitation of indigenous elders by family members. Developed remote community outreach for areas underserved by traditional banks. The international collaboration led to information sharing about scammer tactics, cross-border investigations, and coordinated prevention efforts. Scammers operate globally, Angela told an Interpol conference. Our response needs to be global too. When a call center in Jamaica scams Americans, a cybercrime ring in Russia scams Europeans, and a romance scammer in Nigeria targets Australians, we need international cooperation to investigate and prosecute. 12 years after stopping Dorothy Martinez scam, Angela Martinez received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, for her work protecting elderly Americans from financial exploitation. Standing in the White House, Angela felt overwhelmed. She was being recognized alongside scientists, artists, activists, and leaders. She was just a bank teller who had paid attention when something seemed wrong. Angela Williams saw an elderly customer in distress and refused to look away, the president said during the ceremony. Her intervention saved one woman's life savings, but her subsequent work creating the Bankwatch program has protected hundreds of thousands of seniors and prevented losses exceeding $500 million. She has transformed how financial institutions protect vulnerable customers and created a national movement against elder exploitation. Her work exemplifies the profound impact one person's compassion and determination can have. After the ceremony, Dorothy Martinez, now 88 years old, approached Angela. They'd stayed in touch over the years, and Dorothy had become an advocate herself, speaking about her near victimization to warn others. "Thank you," Dorothy said, hugging Angela. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for believing something was wrong even when I didn't believe it myself, for saving my money and my dignity, and thank you for using what happened to me to protect so many others." Dorothy had become a symbol of the issue, the face of near victimization that prompted action. She'd testified before Congress, appeared in educational videos, and spoken at countless senior centers. "I'm embarrassed it happened to me," Dorothy would tell audiences, "but I'm not ashamed anymore. I was targeted by professional criminals who knew exactly how to manipulate me. The only thing I should be ashamed of would be staying silent and letting others become victims too. So I speak up, I warn people, I tell my story so maybe someone else won't fall for the same tricks." 15 years after that pivotal day at the bank, Angela Williams, now 56 years old, had stepped back from full-time advocacy work, but remained connected to the cause that had defined the second half of her career. Bankwatch had become an established institution. Over 2,500 financial institutions participated. The program had evolved to include AI-powered transaction monitoring, real-time fraud alerts, and predictive analytics that could identify potential scam victims before they even came to the bank. "Technology has enhanced what we do," Angela told a conference, "but it hasn't replaced the human element. AI can flag suspicious transactions, but it still requires a human being to talk to the customer, ask questions, show compassion, and make the judgment call about whether to intervene. That human element is irreplaceable." Statistics showed the impact. Roncart's $150 million in prevented losses since program inception, 15,000 plus scam attempts stopped annually, 500 plus criminal arrests linked to Bankwatch intelligence, 95% reduction in successful scams against customers at participating banks, 0 successful scams among trained tellers who followed protocols. But Angela knew the work was never finished. Scammers continued evolving their tactics. New technologies created new vulnerabilities. The elderly population was growing, creating more potential targets. She continued training new bank employees, updating materials to address emerging scams, partnering with law enforcement on investigations, and advocating for stronger protections. 15 years ago, I was a bank teller who stopped one scam, Angela told audiences. Today, thousands of bank employees stop scams every day because they've been trained to recognize and respond to warning signs. That's not my achievement. That's a movement. That's a culture change. That's what happens when ordinary people commit to protecting vulnerable members of our community. On the 15th anniversary of Dorothy Martinez's near scam, First National Bank organized a special event honoring Angela's work and raising awareness about elder financial protection. The event brought together people whose lives had been touched by Angela's advocacy. Dorothy Martinez, the woman whose near scam had started everything. Detective James Chen, now retired but still consulting on elder exploitation cases. Dozens of bank employees who'd stopped scams using BankWatch training. Scam victims who'd become advocates after their experiences. Law enforcement officers who'd made arrests based on BankWatch intelligence. Legislators who'd strengthened laws protecting seniors. Researchers studying the impact of bank-based fraud prevention. Dorothy spoke about how her life might have been different if Angela hadn't questioned that withdrawal 15 years ago. I would have lost $35,000, my entire savings. I would have been financially ruined in my 70s. I might have lost my home. I would have been devastated emotionally. My quality of life for my final years would have been destroyed. All because a scammer exploited my love for my grandson. She looked at Angela. But that didn't happen, because one bank teller paid attention and cared enough to intervene. And then she cared enough to make sure the same thing wouldn't happen to other grandmothers. That's a legacy to be proud of. Maria Lopez, the teller from Detroit who'd stopped the lottery scam, spoke about how Angela's training had changed her approach to her job. Before the training, I would have just processed that withdrawal. I would have thought it was none of my business what customers did with their money. But Angela taught me that sometimes our business is protecting people from making devastating mistakes. That customer thanked me for saving his life savings. That's powerful. That's meaningful work. Detective Chen shared statistics about how BankWatch intelligence had contributed to major investigations and prosecutions. Angela created a system that doesn't just protect individual customers, it generates intelligence that helps us dismantle entire criminal networks. As Angela approached retirement from banking, she wanted to ensure her work would continue and expand beyond what she could personally manage. She established the Williams Foundation for Elder Financial Protection, a nonprofit dedicated to education, advocacy, and research on preventing elder exploitation. The foundation's mission was threefold: education, train financial industry professionals on fraud prevention, educate seniors about common scams and protection strategies, develop school curricula, teaching young people to recognize and report elder exploitation, create multilingual accessible resources for diverse communities, advocacy, push for stronger laws and enforcement against elder exploitation, advocate for better victim support services, promote mandatory fraud prevention training for financial institutions, work internationally to combat cross-border scam operations, evaluate effectiveness of different prevention strategies, develop new technologies and approaches for protection, track emerging scam tactics and develop countermeasures. The foundation was funded by donations from banks that had benefited from BankWatch, from individuals grateful for Angela's work, and from victims who wanted their losses to have meaning by preventing others from being victimized. Sophie Martinez, Dorothy's granddaughter who the scammer had impersonated 15 years ago, joined the foundation's board. Now in her 30s with a career in social work, Sophie brought her perspective as someone whose identity had been used to exploit a loved one. I feel weird guilt about what happened to my grandmother, Sophie told the board. Logically, I know I did nothing wrong. Criminals impersonated me. But emotionally, I feel responsible. Working with this foundation helps me channel that into something positive, protecting other families from the same exploitation. The foundation quickly became a leading voice in elder protection advocacy, partnering with AARP, state attorneys general, the FBI, and international organizations fighting elder exploitation. 20 years after finding that withdrawal slip from Dorothy Martinez, Angela Williams sat in her home office, surrounded by awards, photos, and letters from people she'd helped over 2 decades of advocacy work. She thought about how her life had changed from that moment when she'd noticed Dorothy's trembling hands and terrified eyes, how she'd made the uncomfortable choice to question the transaction instead of just processing it, how that choice had sparked 2 decades of work that had protected hundreds of thousands of people. She thought about all the Dorothy Martinez who hadn't been stopped, the ones who had lost their savings before anyone intervened. She thought about the scammers who were still operating, still targeting vulnerable seniors, still exploiting love and fear for profit. The work would never be finished, but it was better than it had been 20 years ago. More people were protected. More criminals were caught. More awareness existed. Her husband David found her there, looking contemplative. "What are you thinking about? About that day 20 years ago?" Angela said. "How close I came to just processing that withdrawal. How easy it would have been to assume Dorothy knew what she was doing with her own money. How I almost didn't intervene." She paused. "I think about how many tellers before me had processed withdrawals for scam victims and never questioned them. How many seniors lost everything because no one paid attention or cared enough to ask questions. How broken the system was that allowed professional criminals to exploit vulnerable people without any resistance." David sat beside her. "But you changed that. You built a system where people do pay attention, where questions are asked, where resistance exists. You took one prevented scam and turned it into a national movement." Angela smiled. "I didn't do it alone." Dorothy spoke up about her experience. "Detective Chen partnered with me. Thousands of bank employees implemented the training. Advocates and victims and law enforcement all contributed. It was a collective effort. That you started," David said. "That you sustained through 20 years of work. That you built from one moment of paying attention when no one else had."
On Angela's last day at the bank before her full retirement, She was asked to speak to the current staff about what she'd learned over 30 years in banking and 20 years fighting elder exploitation. Standing before a room full of tellers, managers, and executives, Angela felt the weight of 3 decades of experience. When I started as a teller 30 years ago, she began, I thought my job was to process transactions efficiently and accurately. Deposits, withdrawals, transfers, just execute what customers requested. I was good at it, fast, accurate, professional. She paused. But 20 years ago, an elderly woman named Dorothy Martinez came to my window wanting to withdraw $35,000 in cash. She was trembling. She was crying. She kept looking at the clock with panic in her eyes. And something inside me said, this isn't right. Angela told the story she'd told hundreds of times. Dorothy's grandson supposedly in jail in Mexico. The urgent need for bail money. The plea for secrecy. The terror that her grandson would suffer if she didn't send money immediately. I could have processed that withdrawal, Angela said. Dorothy was a competent adult. It was her money. She wanted it. What business was it of mine, what she did with it? That would have been the easy choice, the safe choice, the choice that didn't risk offending a customer or causing a scene. She looked around the room, but I made the hard choice. I questioned her. I asked what the money was for. I called my manager. I contacted police, and Dorothy was furious with me. She thought I was preventing her from helping her grandson. She thought I was just being difficult. Angela smiled, but it was a scam. Her grandson was safe at college in Michigan. If I had processed that withdrawal, Dorothy would have lost her entire life savings to criminals. She would have been financially ruined, but because I paid attention, because I trusted my instincts, because I made the uncomfortable choice to intervene, she kept her money. She clicked to her next slide, showing statistics from 20 years of BankWatch. That one intervention sparked something bigger, a realization that banks could be more than transaction processors, we could be protectors, that bank employees could be more than button pushers, we could be guardians for vulnerable customers. Angela showed more slides, hundreds of prevented scams, hundreds of millions in protected savings, thousands of arrests, countless families saved from financial devastation. This didn't happen because I'm special. It happened because I paid attention, because I acted when something felt wrong, because I chose protecting a customer over processing a transaction quickly. Any of you could make the same choice. Any of you could be the person who notices when something's wrong and takes action. Her voice grew passionate. You're not just bank tellers. You're not just customer service representatives. You're on the front lines of a fight against criminals who target our most vulnerable customers. Every day you have opportunities to protect people. Every day you might encounter someone like Dorothy Martinez, desperate, scared, about to make a terrible mistake that will ruin their life. Angela looked at each person in the room. Will you notice? Will you care? Will you act? Or will you just process the transaction and move on to the next customer? She paused. 20 years ago, I chose to notice, to care, to act. That choice defined the rest of my career and created a movement that's protected hundreds of thousands of people. I'm not special. I just made a choice. The same choice any of you can make when your moment comes. Angela's voice softened. Pay attention to people, not just transactions. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Have the courage to ask uncomfortable questions. Be willing to delay or question a transaction if it might protect someone. Understand that your job isn't just moving money, it's protecting the people whose money you're moving. She clicked to her final slide, a photo of Dorothy Martinez at 88 years old, smiling, healthy, independent. This is Dorothy today. She's lived 15 years of financial security because I paid attention one day, 20 years ago. Her quality of life, her independence, her dignity, all protected because one bank teller made one choice. Angela looked at the audience. You have that same power, every day, every customer, every transaction, the power to notice when something's wrong, the power to protect vulnerable people, the power to stop criminals from destroying lives. 20 years ago, I was just a bank teller who noticed an elderly woman in distress and refused to look away. That choice changed my life and saved hundreds of thousands of others. You can make that same choice. You can be the person who pays attention, who cares, who acts. Be that person. When the moment comes, and it will come, be the person who notices, who questions, who protects. That's all it takes. One person paying attention, one person caring enough to act, one person making the hard choice. Make that choice. Save someone. Change the world. The room erupted in applause. After her speech, dozens of employees approached Angela, thanking her for her work and committing to being vigilant for customers who might need protection. One young teller, barely 25, said, "I've only been here 6 months. Sometimes I feel like just a number cruncher, but hearing your story reminds me that this job matters, that I matter, that I could be the person who saves someone's life savings someday. Thank you for showing me what's possible." Angela hugged her. "You already have that power. You've always had it. Now you know to use it. That's all you need, awareness and willingness to act. The rest will follow." As Angela left the bank for the last time as an employee, she felt at peace. Her work would continue through the thousands of people she'd trained, the systems she'd built, the foundation she'd established. The movement had taken on a life beyond her individual efforts. Somewhere right now, an elderly person was being targeted by scammers. But somewhere right now, a bank teller trained in BankWatch was noticing something wrong and asking questions. A transaction was being stopped. A victim was being protected. A life was being saved. That was legacy enough. More than enough. Everything. Angela walked out into the Chicago sunshine, 20 years older than when she'd met Dorothy Martinez, but 20 years wiser about the power of paying attention and the importance of making uncomfortable choices to protect vulnerable people. One choice, one person, 20 years of impact, hundreds of thousands of lives protected, all because a bank teller paid attention and refused to look away. This story is dedicated to every bank teller, financial services representative, and customer service professional who has ever noticed something wrong and had the courage to question it. Your vigilance protects vulnerable people from exploitation. Your willingness to ask uncomfortable questions saves life savings. Thank you for paying attention and choosing to protect the people you serve.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.